It was perhaps one of the longest and most difficult walks down the aisle that I have ever done. I found myself grieving as I walked down the aisle, and tears began to stream down my face. As I sat down, I did something that I almost never do, which is cry in public, and I didn't just cry, I sobbed. Now, I want you to know that this was not the walk down the aisle after my wedding. So when you meet my husband later, you can be rest assured that that's not it. It wasn't a walk down the aisle after any church service that I led or any funeral that I've done. It was on the first day of seminary during our student orientation. We had all been asked to bring an object that represented the life that we were leaving behind in order to come to seminary. And so I brought a wreath. It was a brightly colored wreath wound with red ribbon, and it had little crayons hanging from it, and it had a nice little sign that had my name on it. It was a wreath that someone had made for me for my first year of teaching. Now, what you need to know is that for close to 20 years, and I was really only 24 at the time, all I had ever wanted to do was to become a teacher. When I was little, I would line up all my dolls, and I would make little worksheets for them. My mom was a teacher, so I took her old books, and I would teach little lessons to my dolls and stuffed animals. I volunteered and I served in Vacation Bible School. I tutored kids after school. I babysat all the time. I majored in elementary education, and I was good at it. I loved teaching, and I thought that it would be the perfect career, the perfect calling for me. But somehow, I ended up in seminary instead. Now, last week, Pastor Don talked about how from time to time, God calls us from here to go there. Now, for me, that moment in seminary, that first day at orientation, was a big step from here to there. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the there that I came from before I got to seminary and before I got here. So I grew up in a little town called Polo, Illinois. Polo is about 2,300 people. It's located in northern Illinois, about 2 hours straight west of Chicago. My family and I attended East Jordan United Methodist Church. It's a little church in the country, literally surrounded by fields on all sides. We had, when I was there, about 100 people on a Sunday. One thing, if you would talk to any of those folks that went there every Sunday, that they would tell you about me as a child is that I was very quiet, very shy, and none of them would have ever predicted that I would end up as a preacher, including myself. Now, everyone in my family, almost everyone in my family and extended family, were active in church. My grandparents were very active. Some of them belonged to different denominations, but they were all very, very involved and had a deep faith and connection to God. I think that you could say my childhood was surrounded by grace. In the United Methodist tradition, we have a special word for that kind of grace. We call it prevenient grace, the grace that comes before we're ever aware of our need for God or of who God is. It's just there. You're plunked into goodness. And so as I grew in years, I also grew in my faith. When I was in 8th grade, I got to go to Wesley Woods. It's a church camp in Williams Bay, Wisconsin, right on Lake Geneva. And while I was there, the counselors shared their faith stories. And they told about how God worked in their everyday life. They talked about how God had led them to do big and extraordinary things, things that I had never done. And they talked about how God gave them this joy and enthusiasm for living. They were on an adventure with God, and I wanted that. I found myself feeling almost guilty. I thought I was a really good church goer. I knew most of the stories in the Bible. I knew that I had the love of Jesus down in my heart, but I still didn't quite have that adventure piece. I didn't have the excitement and the everyday, every minute interactions with God that the counselors were describing. And I found myself wanting more, wanting to experience that joy and adventure that they talked about. And so on the last night of camp, when we were all in our tents, curled up in our sleeping bags, I spent some time praying to God, and I asked God to deepen our relationship together and to have some of that adventure. I asked God to be more of an everyday part of my life. Now, this is what we United Methodists call justifying grace. It is the grace that allows us to see our imperfections, to see that something is missing or not quite right, and then God justifies us or evens out the margins, evens us out so that we can be made right and justified before God. Now, I think one of the exciting things about our journey with God is that it doesn't stop after one prayer. You don't say, God, I want a better relationship with you, and God says that's good, and everything stays the same. Instead, God continues to push us forward, to push us into new areas and new places. And we, again, have a term for this in our tradition and our theology. We call it sanctifying grace, that God continues to make us more holy, to show us his ways and his plan and his walk, and we continue to learn new things about God. And so I experienced this in several different ways. One was a year after this church camp, I signed up for my first mission trip. Our church went once a year on a week-long trip and volunteered with Habitat for Humanity. And we traveled this particular year to Ludington, Michigan. And I remember very clearly that on the first day of the trip, halfway there, we stopped at a rest stop. And the leader asked us to go around and share, why is it that you came on this trip? And I remember thinking, I hope they don't call on me, because I didn't know why I went on that trip. I really went because my friends had said, let's go. And you know, that's what junior high kids tend to do, right? Or high schoolers. We go because our friends go. But God used even that less than perfect motive to bring something good. Since then, I've been on at least 10 other Habitat for Humanity trips. I've been on other mission trips going as far as India. It's been an adventure, a lifelong love of serving others and reaching out to people in need. After high school, I went to Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. And before arriving on campus, I knew absolutely no one. Now, for a girl who came from a small town of about 2,000 people and a girl who came from a small church, knowing absolutely no one was a really big deal. I thought I could reinvent myself in this place. I no longer have to be Becky the shy and the quiet. I could be Becky the popular and the cool. Well, sort of. Maybe not totally cool, but anyway, I made new friends and things were going really well. And then after the first week or so of classes, a flyer showed up on our dorm room door, and it invited us to go to a Christian meeting for the Christian group on campus. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I want to label myself as a Christian. You know, like, isn't that going to be putting myself in the geek camp? And I don't know if I really want to do that. And so I struggled with the decision. I was making a new name and a new place for myself. But I knew that I loved God, and I knew that it would be good to go. And so eventually I went, and I'm so glad that I did, because I met the most amazing people. And I learned all sorts of things that I hadn't known before about how to really deeply study the Bible, how to set up and do daily devotions. I learned how to share my faith with boldness and confidence. And again, each new step on that journey was a scary one. Every time I signed up for a new retreat or a new leadership position or to lead a Bible study, it was scary. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure if this is right for me. Each step was challenging to me to go beyond my comfort zone. I graduated in college in 2002. which, if you're trying to do the math quickly, makes me 35, turning 36 at the end of August. And I got a job working in a first grade classroom, and it was not at all what I expected. I hated it. And I don't want to say anything bad about teachers. I love teaching, and I still love the teachers that I had, but it was not a good experience for me. And there's a lot of stories to that first year, but it's enough to say, I think, that it was my time in the slums. I lost my position after that year. It was cut. I moved back home. I started subbing. I thought maybe I'm just teaching the wrong thing, so I started taking classes to become a reading specialist. And I would drive an hour to get to class from where we lived and an hour back. And on those drives, I prayed a lot. And I asked God, where are you leading me? Why is it that life just doesn't seem to be fitting together? Why is it that doors are closing? And during those prayers, I felt the call to go to seminary. And it was a call that was indeed echoed by my pastor and by other friends and family. But it was still a huge leap of faith. Which brings us back to that story I told you at the beginning. I had to leave behind that dream of becoming a teacher and embrace a new journey with God. And it was a hard moment, because it's never easy to leave behind the dreams that we thought were right for us. But God had given me a new dream, and it was a good dream, a great dream. It is one that I am grateful for every day. It allowed me to receive blessings far beyond what I could have imagined. I met incredible friends. I met my wonderful husband, and we got married right there at the seminary. That marriage obviously allowed me to have children, and it's been a wonderful ride, and I love this job. It feels so privileged to be able to stand here and to be your pastor. So for me, the theme of my story, if there is one, is being pushed out of comfort zones and into places that are new and scary. And it's happened to me in hundreds of ways that I didn't have time to mention. But I think this moving out of our comfort zones is consistent with the way that God works. As we look at that roll call of the faithful in Hebrews 11, each of them had to take a leap of faith at some point. Noah had to believe that building an ark wasn't crazy. Abraham had to believe that following this God that he didn't know and going to a place that he had never been would actually work out. He and Sarah had to believe that even though they were old, they really would have a child. David had to believe that he could be a king even though he was young, or that he could kill a giant. Elijah, that we talked about last week, had to survive in enemy territory and believe that God would provide with just a handful of flour, living with a poor widow and her son. The author says that there are so many names that they can't even be mentioned, and every single one of them was pushed out of their comfort zones and into this new place. I once heard an analogy about our journey with God, that God leads us in a similar way to the way that the blood flows in the body. That, the blood flows out to the very tips and the extremities, and then it runs out of oxygen, and it goes back into the lungs, and it's drawn in and receives that oxygen, and then it goes back out. And in the same way, God takes us when we are broken, when we are out of nutrients, when we are out of steam, and God draws us in and gives us the grace that we need and the strength and the friends that we need to support us. And then you know what happens? The blood can't stay in the lungs forever because you would drown. It has to go back out. And it gets pumped back out into the extremities to nourish the rest of the body. And that's what happens to us too. Sometimes it means you have to get sent down, way down to the pinky toes. And sometimes it's to places that we don't like. But God sends us out and then draws us back in and gives us the comfort and strength, and then sends us back out again, in and out. So this week, I want you to think about your own faith journey. I don't know where you are on that journey. You might be in a place where you really need God's comfort and God's strength. And if so, come and soak it up. Fill out a prayer card, turn to your neighbor, ask for prayer, go to a covenant group or a Bible study. But soak up that grace, because God wants to bring you comfort and healing. But if you're feeling good, if you've been comforted, if you feel that love and grace of God, guess what? It's time to go out. It's time to go out to the extremities and nourish someone else. It's going to require, in some cases, going out of your comfort zone, and it will be scary. But I have found over and over that adventures with God, though scary they may be on the front end, are always infinitely worth it. So let us allow Jesus to be the author and perfecter of our faith. Author is a word from the King James Version. So sometimes it says pioneer, sometimes it says author and perfecter of our faith. But let us allow Jesus to write that story and push us out into new places and avenues. Let us go and adventure with God. Let me pray with you. Gracious God, we thank you that you guide us and you lead us. Wherever it is we are in our journey, I pray that you would give us strength and give us guidance. Help us to know where we are being sent and where we are being called. Give us the courage to follow that dream and that call that you have for us. We ask and pray all this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.